So earlier this week, I sent out a survey and there was three topics: self-esteem, forgiveness, mental health. I spoke about forgiveness yesterday. I'm talking about mental health tonight. So I want to talk about self-esteem. And what I'll try to do is not talk the cliches. Oh my gosh, it's very important that each and every one of you have a self-esteem, etc., etc. I'm going to try to take it from a different angle, and hopefully together we can explore it. It's an interesting expression, self-esteem. You esteem yourself. You have esteem for yourself. It's a fancy word. What does esteem actually even mean? Why doesn't it mean, why can't we just use simpler words like self-love, self-respect? So the dictionary says esteem is respect and admiration, typically for a person. So self-esteem means that you respect and admire yourself. Interesting. Is that something we should be aspiring for? Is that something that we should hope for? So if you go on the dictionary and you see self-esteem, they say confidence in one's own worth or abilities, self-respect. Okay, fine. In other words, people should believe that they're capable. Each and every one of us knows somebody in our life who doesn't have self-esteem. Even if we can't define what self-esteem is, you know when somebody doesn't have self-esteem, when they have shocking self-esteem, when they are walking hunched, insecure, afraid to have an opinion. Sometimes they might come across as standoffish. Sometimes they might come across as insecure, but they struggle to engage with this world from a sense of presence. Self-esteem is I engage with this world from a space of safety. I can only talk for my own life. There was a long time in my life that was very insecure. And I mean very insecure, embarrassingly insecure. And I would walk into a room, I would walk into a space, and literally my mind would be consumed with self-doubt, sense of everyone else has it together and I don't, a sense of I am not good enough to navigate life. You know, at some stage, we were all children once upon a time. And at some stage, we transitioned to adulthood. Some of us did it in our teens, some of us did it in our 20s, and some of us are still not adults. And what's the big transition from a teen to an adult, besides the fact that you become independent? A big part of it is you wake up one day and you realize that to navigate life is not so simple. The life is complicated and messy, and there's so many rules that nobody teaches you, social etiquette, ways to earn money, ways to spend money, ways to show love, ways to not show love, boundaries. Just think about how much a person has to know in order to live a normal life. It's actually incredible how much knowledge it is. Like when I look at my kids, I look at my 6-month-old, beautiful little girl, and obviously cute and delicious, but totally clueless. Innocent, which is another word for clueless, which is beautiful. I don't want her to be any less naive at 8 months. She's naive. If she was this cute at 50, I'm not sure that would be funny. And if she was that naive at 10, it would also not be, it wouldn't be funny. But right now, it's cute. And the amount this little girl has to learn in order to navigate this world is unreal. It's actually unreal. And then very often children are born with things that make learning harder. So for example, one child will be born on the spectrum. One child will be born with ADD. One child will be, and I'm not even talking about like children who have serious disabilities. I'm just talking about basic. social ineptness, struggle to learn, and they have to get special education, and they struggle to navigate this world even with the basic, what we call basic skills. They struggle and they have to go. And you actually see how much we have to learn based on what these kids have to go through. The amount of therapists you have to take a child who is learning disabled, dyslexic, or emotionally disabled, on the spectrum, etc., is incredible. And that's all the stuff that other kids figure out intuitively, or supposed to figure out intuitively. This child needs to be taught it. That's really what it is. And if a child has a physical disability, then certain things that, most children figure out, this kid will have to go to OT or physio just to learn how to walk or to hold a fork or the smallest things. So you walk into this world clueless and beautiful and hopefully well cared for and loved. And at some stage in the next few years, you have to learn to navigate this world, and not only navigate, succeed on multiple fronts, succeed in your relationships, succeed in academics, succeed in health, succeed in interacting, and a million other stuff. And at some stage, many of us, when we were younger, struggled with it. Some people are just naturally born savvy or cool. They have the cool factor, so they could compensate for the lack of their lacks by just coming across that they have it all together. And then there's many other people who interact with this world thinking they have it all together, knowing that they don't have it together. Interesting. I guess what caused me to think about this is I reached out to a friend yesterday. He does an incredible work on mental health, etc., and brings mental health awareness, and also just to do some research for tonight's lecture. Reached out to him, and I said, "Thank you so much for what you do, etc." And he says, Levi, remember when you spoke last year to your class? Because I mentioned this, but about 18 months ago, or even longer, 20 months ago, I went to New York just before my father passed away. I didn't know he was going to pass away. And I spoke at a reunion, a 20-year reunion from grade 8. And I spoke over there about my challenges. He says, I still can't believe that you actually had challenges. I looked at you, and he says, you were one of the guys I was jealous of. And all I'm thinking while he's talking to me is, and you were one of the guys that I was jealous of. And that's life. And that is how false life is. So he sees me as, the kid who's doing academically well. I see him as the kid who's doing socially well. Both of us think that our weakness in one element, my weakness in, let's say, social, and his weakness in academic defines us. And both of us are walking around feeling insecure, thinking that the other person got the better lot in life, and both of us are struggling. But the point is that self-esteem often comes from this inability to believe that I can navigate this world, that I'm good enough to this world, because the world is so demanding. I'm not the world, I'm saying just life. It expects so much from us to rise up. Just think about, I don't know if any of you have children married or children who are in a serious relationship. Think about how hard it is to have a relationship. And this child was born 25, 30 years ago, 21 years ago, whatever. Selfish, self-centered, sweet. And in 20 years, they have to learn a profession. They have to learn the ways of the world. They have to learn how to think about somebody else. They have to learn how to build long-term relationships. Life puts a tremendous demand on us. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I'm not one of those people that's saying, oh, Shane, we should just let people deal with their life the way they have to, blah, 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 blah. Life demands from us. We get a small amount of years, 90, 100 years, and God looks at us, and whatever life looks at us and says, do more, rise to the occasion. But what happens when you don't succeed in all areas and you start defining yourself by how well you're navigating this world? That's very dangerous. It's very dangerous when we compare our own, I'll call it navigation, that's really what it is, our own ability to navigate this world towards others. Look at that person, they're so clever, they get it the first time in class. Or look at that person, so beautiful, naturally good looking, and just fantastic and charismatic. Or look at this person, they just raise their kids like so at ease, etc. They just have it. They have a knack for it. Or look at etc. 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 And I can't. My worth does not come from how I navigate life. My worth comes from the fact that I'm living. Let me explain what I mean. The simple fact that I am alive, and as a person of faith, and I believe that God put me here, and even without faith, the simple fact that I am here means I'm worthy of living and means I'm worthy of love. I don't have to do anything to earn respect. I don't have to do anything to see myself as worthy. Because for me, that's what self-esteem is. It's not necessarily respect myself, etc. It's seeing myself as worthy. I deserve to be here. That's really what for me self-esteem is. I deserve to, not entitled, but I'm good enough to be here. The fact that I'm here means I'm good enough, and I'm good enough to be here. And I belong here. And I don't belong here any less, I don't belong at this table any less than anybody else. I have the metaphorical table behind me. I don't, every person sitting at that table belongs there, and so do I. Whether I don't think I'm as slick as them, maybe I don't navigate this world the way they do. That's my role. And I'm here and I deserve to be here. And I want to explore this a little deeper, if you don't mind. Each and every one of us has strengths and has weaknesses. For example, no matter what I'm going to do, I'm never going to be a natural fit for physical labor. I'm not talking about hard labor. I'm talking about if I had to become a mechanic, God help the cars. I don't have that, what I call action-based wisdom, the wisdom of just working with things, construction, fixing. In our house, Chaya fixes everything. Not that I don't volunteer. I just think she gave up on having to fix my stuff and she just goes for it originally. She has that knack. I just don't. Therefore, even my creativity, I struggle to articulate it through art because, again, there's not necessarily that congruence of my mind with my body. Other people, dancers, musicians, artists, people who express themselves in a physical way versus me that I express myself through words. Those people, they have a wisdom that literally comes from themselves into their body. And what they're feeling can be expressed through movement, through painting, through sculpture, etc. Now, I will never be a natural fit for that area. Now, that's not a problem. But the point is, I'm not. And I don't think any of us, I'm sure that none of us are born as a natural fit to every area of life. There are certain areas of life that all of us have to figure out, otherwise we just can't navigate and we become dependent. In other words, if you can't walk without seeing, looking both sides of the street, then that's a problem, and we're going to need to be dependent on somebody for the rest of our life, etc. But I'm saying within people who are healthy and relatively, coping with this world, I'm talking about, those of us who are just, struggle, but we still made a life for ourselves. None of us are perfect in all areas. We plug in and we have a natural intuition to certain areas of life. Some of us may be intuitive emotionally. Some of us are intuitive intellectually. Some of us are intuitive physically. Some of us are intuitive in relationships, whatever it is. Other areas we're not that great. Now, if I define myself by my abilities and disabilities, then ultimately my sense of self is very fickle. For example, I define my skill that I've developed in my life as EQ, reading emotions, etc. Now, if at this stage in my life as a rabbi, I want to develop an identity of that, it's not too dangerous. But when I tried to develop an identity of that 20 years ago as an adolescent, nobody appreciates that. Like, okay, so you read emotions, you're just weird. You're a guy. What are you even talking about emotions? Um, so that's a risky way to build your identity based on your skills. Because what if those skills are not appreciated in that circle? Then you have no sense of self. What if in the life you ended up with, your skills don't surface that well? For example, I imagine people who are cinematographers, people who make incredible movies, directors. I think like, Steven Spielberg, if he was born 200 years ago, what would he be? Chances are he would be a frustrated artist because his platform of art wasn't invented yet. And maybe, yeah, he would make paintings, etc., but he wouldn't be exceptional. And so what? So if my identity comes from the fact I'm a great director of movies and I don't have the access to the movies, then what am I? If my identity comes from the fact I'm a mom, but my kids are no longer home, or I never had children, then where does it come from? The problem with self-esteem that comes from anything other than my inherent worthiness is that it's too dependent on something that can be taken away. It's not real. And also what it leads to is making people in different classes. Oh, that person's, they have an IQ of 140 and they have amazing relationships. They naturally have good looks. They have a pizzazz and they're savvy and they're incredible. They made it on the social ladder. There goes the other person, a total nebuchal, half the IQ, half the EQ, half the looks, if not a tenth, just like a total schlemazel, less worthy. And think about racism and xenophobia and sexism and anti-Semitism and any of these isms, any of these hating isms. At the core, what are they? At the core, they're coming and saying, you were born with skin X, you're less. You're born that gender, you're less. You're born that religion, you're less, etc., etc. In other words, your worthiness, you would be more worthy in my eyes if you had this color skin. And you would be more worthy in my eyes if you had this gender. And you would be more worthy in my eyes if you weren't such an idiot. So your worthiness is dependent on things that are outside your control. And more than that, they're things that are here one day, gone the next. And unfortunately, I'm dealing with it currently in the community. Quite a few people who lost jobs during COVID or people struggling with certain areas and losing their sense of self because they define themselves some way. No judgment, but they define themselves. I'm a working husband, I'm a working father, I'm a working mom. And the moment that was taken away from them by circumstances beyond their control, what am I? I can't even bring bread home anymore. What am I? What are you? What were you till now? What do you think you were? You think that you came home with a check every single month for 70, 80, 100K is what defined you? Really? Is that what made you, you? It, then ultimately, what are you? You're a money machine. You're a money cow. You're an ATM machine. I'm not saying people shouldn't go support their family. Of course, it's a mandate. It's obligatory. But if my sense of self comes from there, it's dangerous. And I know this for myself because I sometimes struggle to have an inherent sense of self, and I'll try to build my sense of self on an accomplishment I've done. But then the accomplishment is done. And what now? How long could you live off that? Oh, wow, you saw what I've done? Then what? Then what? A day, a week? It doesn't last. And if I'm just running from accomplishment to accomplishment, and all that is to develop a sense of self, then I don't have a sense of self. For me, self-esteem, I don't like the words, but whatever, that's what the vernacular, that's what people use, is for me to respect myself simply for being here. I'm worthy of love. Obviously, I have to go out and accomplish. Obviously, I have to do things. I don't have to sit on my couch, waste my life, gain weight, and just fall, die from alcohol. No. But because I respect myself, therefore I'll do things with dignity. I'll live a respectful life. In other words, it shouldn't be that you do things to earn your respect. It should be you respect yourself and therefore you do things. You love yourself and therefore, for example, give you an example. I love my child. I want my children, each one of them, to be incredibly successful. Will I love them less if not? No. But will my heart be sore for them if they're not? Yes. Why? Because I love them. I want them to accomplish. And hopefully that's healthy parenting. I hope, again, it's very easy for me to talk about parenting when my kids are still kids. But if I'm raising kids and no, you'll earn your love when you become a somebody, how terrible is that? That's called conditional love. And we all know that's a crime. So why do we do it to ourselves? If doing it to your kid would damage your kid, I'll only love you if you get good grades. I'll only love you if you have good looks. I'll only love you if you're, cool, or you give me nachas. If that's the definition, it's not love. Not love at all. I don't love you. I love your success. I love the feeling that you make me feel when my kid is successful. I love walking around with like a nachas machine. But we all know that that's dysfunctional parenting. None of us would ever convince ourselves that that's remotely decent parenting. So why do we parent ourselves that way? Why do so many of us tell ourselves or tell our spouses that our sense of self should come based on what you do? And I'll be honest, I think men struggle in this more than women. I'm not saying all women have great self-esteem. They don't. I think it's a human problem, but I do think that women at least are more diversified in their life. So it's not as risky if they, because even if one part of their life collapses, they have other parts of their life. But I personally think they shouldn't make it dependent on any part of life. The problem with men is they also put it on, but it's on one thing or two things: my job, my fitness, my wealth. It's a very small, narrow definition of self-esteem. Based on that, only the top 1% should be walking around worthy, and the other 99% are a bunch of losers who couldn't swim to the top, who never surfaced. They couldn't figure out the magical technique to build a multi-billion-dollar company. You're a total loser. So women maybe set themselves up better because they have more areas, but it's still as problematic. Why are we loving ourselves based on what we do? I have good kids. I'm a great person. My kids didn't end up exactly perfect. I'm less than. Saying we don't have to be accountable for our mistakes. But on the contrary, accountability for mistakes can only come from self-esteem. In other words, if let's say my name's Levi. Levi made a mistake, okay? I don't know. He said something in a lecture that was inappropriate or hurtful. Fine. Something I said in the last 20 minutes hurt your feelings. And you tell me that. You don't sit there keeping it to yourself. You tell me. If I don't have self-esteem, I will fall apart from that criticism. I will build resentment for you because you just made me less than. If I didn't give a perfect lecture, then I'm a waste. I'm a disaster. My whole identity is my lectures now. Forget about me apologizing. I definitely won't apologize. And if anything, I'll apologize to myself for existing. You're such a loser, you're such an idiot. What were you thinking? On the other hand, if Levi has a bit of sense of self, which is not dependent on how the shear comes out, obviously he feels good if the shear works out good, and he feels a little worse, but it's his sense of self. And again, I'm not at this level yet, but it should be. My sense of self comes from a place of, I'm okay. Even on my worst day, I'm okay and I'm worthy of love. My best day and most successful day and my day of the biggest failure and hurt and lowliness are equally deserving of love. then when somebody offers me criticism, I can look and sit there saying, okay, Levi, don't lose your sense of self. You're still a good person. You're still deserving of love. You did a mistake. Can you take accountability of that without falling apart? Yes, take accountability. Can you be humble about the fact that you're not perfect and accept that? And that realize that we don't love you. You shouldn't love yourself because you're perfect, but just because that you are. Okay, good. Now man up and say sorry. I could only stand on Rosh Hashanah and say, I made a mistake from a place of security, not insecurity. Insecurity doesn't say I made a mistake. Insecurity says I am a mistake. My brother, one of my siblings reminded me, my father used to have an expression when he used to get annoyed with certain people who weren't that clever. He would say, when God said brains, the guy thought he said trains and he asked for a slow one. um, some, whatever. Some of us are slow, some of us are quick. But if my identity is that like I'm a slow train or a quick train, then what happens when I'm not as clever as I was? Or my looks start fading, or my successes are no longer, amazing. Then what? And I know that we build up our kids. Well done, you're a prefect. Well done, you've made it. You've done well in your degrees. You're amazing. You found an amazing girl. You've set up your life, etc. You're building them up. You're building them up. But it's so important that in that messaging, we're not telling them, "Oh wow, you're a success," but your brother, well, Yutzlach. Yutzlach means the guy that just doesn't find success anywhere. The shlemazel. Just have to tolerate him, no? Shame. Not everybody comes out, like the same. Eh, really, really. So that kid who's at home and hasn't fully figured out how to navigate this world with absolute slickness, they're any less? Like, I'll be honest, this idea I started the year off with, like some people navigating the world with more slick and some people not. You see it, like even, I thought it was only in high school, but you see it even on Facebook. Some people just have a class and they post interesting messages on Facebook, and some people, each time they message, it's like grating your nerves. Just not plugging in. Like you just have to unfollow them because it's so painful to watch. I hope I'm not one of them. And if I am, I am. Um, yeah, some people just plug in and some people don't. And some of us plugged into some areas of life and some of us not. I see some people who have plugged into the success in the business world, they just got it. They're literally like they were born with their plug in the outlet of success. They just have it. Entrepreneur, build a business, just things fall their way. And yet for the life of theirs, they cannot keep their spouse happy for a half an hour. Their spouse walks around like an absolute miserable wreck. Or they can't parent their kids for the life of theirs. Or they burned every relationship with everybody they know. I don't know. And some people do plug both in. And they have other, but the point is we all have some plugs in, some plugs out. Some plugs might be more worshipped in this world. For example, if you have an incredible, talent in art, you could become a Picasso. Or you have an incredible talent in acting, you could, become one of those big actors or actresses. My mind's going blank. DiCaprio, etc. You can become anything and every, but that's just you basing your value on society and basing your life on opportunity. And I'll be honest, I know myself, I have a long way to get there. I have a long way to go to sit there saying, Levi, even if you didn't have a good day, even if you weren't on top of your game, even if you're not plugged in today to any of the outlets. Some days you wake up and your head is so dull, you're just not plugged into anything. it's still good. It's still good to be here. And I still deserve life. And I'm still worthy of love, affection, kindness, forgiveness. Doesn't mean I don't have to be accountable. I do. And if I made a mistake, I have to deal with it. But not because I am a mistake, but rather because I am a person of value who has to live a life of values. That's what it is. Not because it will make me feel better about myself, but because that's my obligation. But I cannot be successful to build my identity. I have to be successful to play my part and do the most I can in this world. But my identity cannot be dependent on anything I do. That's really, for me, the message of today. The esteem has to come from self. I'm here. Just like the baby, you know, there's nothing other than the fact that she's cute right now. But do I only love the cuteness? Or do I love this child without knowing anything about her personality? I don't know anything about her abilities, and I know nothing about her disabilities. And I'm sure there are many abilities, and I'm sure there are many disabilities, because that's what it means to be human. I'm not cursing her. I'm acknowledging I didn't give birth to an angel. I'm not sure I would want to, but she's no angel. She's beautiful, but she's not an angel. And life's not about creating angels. And I love this child simply for who they are. That's it. You're good enough. You're worthy enough. And whatever I discover of you as I rip off the layers of the onions, I've always referred to getting to know your child as layers of onion. Like each year, you're like, oh, wow, that's the kid. Oh, wow. Oh, wow, he's capable in that. Oh, wow, she can't do that. She could do that. You're like learning to discover this bundle of, cuteness you've brought into the world. And for the next, 20 years or 50 years or 100 years, you're getting to discover along with them who they are. But I don't love you for who you are. I love you for just being you. For me personally, my faith helps me in that way, because not always can I remind myself that I'm deserving of love. And sometimes just focusing on the fact that I woke up today and the creator of heaven and earth gave me another day of life means that I'm no less worthy to be here than anybody else today. I have to make good choices because I have to be responsible. But ultimately, before any choice, the mere fact I woke up this morning is God coming and telling me, you belong in this world on the 11th of August, 2020. And my esteem should come from that. And whatever I accomplish or fail during the day should do nothing to tarnish that essential self. I'm here, and that's okay. And I wish us all during this time of COVID, whatever challenges we're going through, all of us are in transition. Our lives are transitioning in ways that we have no idea. The whole world is shifting. But our sense of self can't come based on anything that shifts, because then it's not sense of self. It's not stable. My sense of self has to be like the roots of a tree in the ground. They move nowhere. The biggest wind can knock the tree half down or all the way down, but the roots never move. And on my worst day, on the day that I always say each one of us has one day in our life that if it ever made it to YouTube, we would destroy our career, our good name, and our family forever, right? We all have those moments. Some people are unlucky that they were caught on YouTube. Somebody filmed them doing that, but we've all had really embarrassing moments. We've all had moments of absolute meltdowns or whatever. Just, our lowest base animalistic self being exposed. But even on that day, I belong here. So L'chaim to each and every one of us as we get closer, less than 6 weeks away from Rosh Hashanah. Let's remember that whatever happens the world around us, It says nothing about me. COVID did not change me. COVID might have affected me, but it didn't change my essential self. And the human being that was here before, and the human being that's here during, and the human being who's going to be here after is the same, the innocent, the beautiful, and worthy of love and respect to themselves and from all those who they get to meet. And if we could respect the humanity in other people, regardless of race, color, creed, social status, for me, and it's not my definition, I've heard of many, for me, a great person is someone who talks to someone on the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder with the same dignity that they talk to a person they're trying to get a job from. Just dignity, not looking down, regardless of the fact that person earns 2,000 Rand a month and that person earns 2 million Rand a month. It's irrelevant. I don't respect you for your money or your lack of it. I respect you for being you and your humanity, and you being created in the image of your creator is more than enough for me to respect you, regardless of how far you've fallen or regardless of mistakes you've made. I would say the same thing for criminals. Obviously, criminals have to be locked up if they're a danger and a menace to society. But once they're locked up and they're no longer a menace, they have to be given human dignity. Whether George Floyd was innocent or not innocent and that he deserved to be arrested was an irrelevant point of the conversation. But what the policeman did to him was immoral because it didn't respect that person's humanity. You know, the whole conversation coming, was George Floyd a hero or was he a zero, or it's irrelevant. What happened was wrong. Once somebody is in your custody and is no longer a stranger, a menace to society, you treat them with dignity. Even if they've done a terrible crime, you treat them with dignity because there's a part inside themselves that's worthy of respect. Even if they have to be accountable for their crimes, even if they have to be even given the death penalty, you could still look at a man and a woman with dignity and respect for their humanity, even while holding them accountable for terrible things they've done. Shkoyach, thank you so much, and I hope that